In Soulsborne games, From Software are very deliberate about how they design their titles, especially in regards to their boss fights. But sometimes we find some rare boss encounters that completely and utterly flop. I'm not talking about the worst fights in Soulsborne, though there can be overlap. I'm more talking about fights that had potential, had a clear idea that you can see from the developers, but that just flopped on arrival when it came to the execution. This could be because the boss doesn't have enough HP, the ideas for the fight simply didn't get fleshed out enough, it could be a boss where regardless of your build, there's no challenge to be had, or the challenge could be badly designed to where it's too difficult for reasons the players can't control. I'm Billy S, and these are 7 Soulsborne bosses who flopped on arrival. And we'll start with the fight that inspired this video, from Dark Souls. Let's jump in. If there was a poster child for bosses that flopped on arrival, it would be Pinwheel, wouldn't it? While there are certainly worse bosses in the original Dark Souls, Pinwheel truly flops in a way that is just spectacular. He comes at the end of a very difficult area, grants a really cool reward in the Rite of Kindling, and yet ends up being one of the easiest fights in the game, if not the easiest. His fight begins with a creepy cutscene that sets this ominous tone, makes you think you're about to fight something terrifying, only to have Pinwheel die in like 5 hits because he has the HP of a coughing baby versus your character's hydrogen bomb. He's a footnote for most players, with the most memorable aspect of his battle being the dark synthy music that accompanies it. But why I consider him a true flop is that I can see what FromSoft wanted from this fight. Pinwheel has the ability to clone himself, which would create a pseudo-gank fight that, with the right health bar and a little more aggression, could have led to a genuine challenge. He's just not very well balanced, and it's not actually clear as to when in the game the developers intended for you to fight him. My guess is you were maybe supposed to fight him after coming back from Blighttown, which would allow you to grab the Rite of Kindling before the Anor Londo Ascent. But most players don't face him until after the Lord Vessel is obtained and they're urged to go kill Gravelord Nito, and skilled players will just run the catacombs at the very start of a playthrough using all the shortcuts to reach his fight and kill him early. It's a real shame. I've always felt Pinwheel was a fight with so much missed potential, especially in the engine of Dark Souls, and I just really wanted him to reach those heights he so desperately deserves. I still love him though, enough to where I actually fanboyed when I found him in my Dark Souls randomizer run from last year. Play the clip! Oh, that's a 4 king. That's a 4 king and... Pinwheel! Yes! Finally! A theme you'll see in today's video is that a lot of these fights could be considered the worst in their games, but they still have a cult following that allows them to thrive, unlike those truly awful fights I've covered in the past. One such nothing burger is the Covetous Demon from Dark Souls 2, which falls under the same category as Pinwheel as a boss that flops on arrival, only in this case it's quite literal. The Covetous Demon is a giant worm that looks like a distant relative of Jabba the Hutt, and I imagine every time you hit him, he makes a sound like a pufferfish eating a carrot. His whole gimmick is that he's hungry, and there's an optional mechanic in the boss fight where you can attack pots above to knock corpses onto the ground, distracting the demon from attacking you. I really like this idea, having to use your arena to your advantage, thus encouraging the use of ranged weapons, which a lot of players tend to avoid or forget about altogether, and being rewarded for it with some easy hits on the boss. The problem is that the Covetous Demon, like Pinwheel, doesn't have the health pool for this mechanic to even factor in. You can very quickly kill this boss with a few stabs and a couple careful dodges, and all he can do to attack you is flop around, maybe do a roll, and very rarely catch you in a grab that unequips all your equipment. That is also an incredibly cool idea that most people will never experience because this boss flops on arrival and never gets off the ground. Ways to fix this fight could include giving the Covetous Demon more health so it can survive for longer, as well as giving his various slams some more AoE effects that would encourage you to back off and time your hits better. Of course, with Dark Souls 2's special hitboxes, could be a blessing in disguise that wasn't implemented. Aside from that, finding a way to make a corpse feeding mechanic a bit more obvious would be cool. Maybe have the boss eat a corpse as you enter the arena, thus showing his hunger. It could be a nice bit of foreshadowing. If Dark Souls 2 ever gets a proper remake, I mean like a reworking from the ground up remake, they better do Covetous Demon right. Alright, time for a hot take. I doubt anybody was expecting an Elden Ring Night Rain boss on this list, but there's one fight that came out recently that should have been a 100% slam dunk for the entire fanbase, but ended up being divisive and, in my opinion, a bit of a flop. Night Rain has Everdark Sovereigns who are harder variants of the Night Lords from the base game, often with new movesets or mechanics that you have to deal with. The one we were most excited for, though, was Everdark Libra. The base Libra fight is one of my new favourites in the franchise, and the concept of a harder variant had me elated. And yet after facing Everdark Libra, at least for me, it was a flop. He completely ditches the mechanics of his original fight for an entirely new set of gimmicks that I just don't think work all that well. He has the ability to summon Condemned, invaders who take the form of the Nightfarers you and your teammates are playing as, each with their own randomized loadout you have to deal with. On top of this, Libra will also coat the arena with various buffs and debuffs which affect both you, the Condemned, and the boss himself. My problem with this fight is that while I completely see what FromSoft were going for, I think the fight flops because none of the mechanics feel very balanced. And that's the one thing they kinda need to be when we're fighting the equilibrious beast. His whole shtick is balance. This mainly comes from the Condemned, whose difficulty are highly dependent on which loadout they spawn with. My example, I used in my recent Night Rain Everdark Sovereign rankings video, is that of the Wilder, where one of the loadouts has him using the Lion's Great Bow, which allows them to spam the Rain of Arrows weapons skill. You can imagine why that might be a pain in the ass. You are completely at the mercy of the game's RNG, which is the complete opposite of Libra's base game fight where you had control over the flow at all times. This battle flops because it takes what everybody loved about the Libra fight and completely removes a majority of what made his fight good, while replacing it with mechanics that simply aren't as rewarding to master. I did some polls on my community tab here on YouTube, and the only two fights the fanbase agrees were better in their base forms were Libra and Caligo. Caligo is much easier to explain, the moveset is just harder and people prefer the spectacle of the base fight, but Libra, it's just clear the new direction with the boss wasn't well received, and I'd say that a rather high fall from grace has the biggest flop when you hit the concrete. It's hard to call any of the fights from Demon Souls flops. After all, the game invented a majority of the tropes we've come to expect from the series. Sure, a fight like the Dragon God has an awful stealth gimmick that isn't very fun, but the fight does work as intended whether we want it to or not. Can't say the same thing for the Maneaters though. The bosses of 3-2 are these chimera-like hybrids that fly through the skies and originated the gargoyle-style gank fights that have become commonplace in the series. However, we always think about the Belfry gargoyles when it comes to that trope. This is because the Maneaters flopped in a way that is much harder to handwave away than some of our previous entries. They're actually a broken fight. The AI of this boss is fucked. There's no other way to put it. You can have instances where the Maneaters will just fly around in the air with no rhyme or reason as to their direction, and you just have to watch. Sometimes they can even fly off into the distance and never come back. They purposefully are able to drag out the fight by staying out of reach, which can be frustrating when you're fighting on a fairly precarious arena where a single hit or two will knock you into the abyss. And this wasn't fixed for the Bluepoint remake. They were happy to give everything better animation, and they were more than willing to completely change the art direction of many of Demon Souls' assets, but God forbid they couldn't fix the AI of the one boss that actually needed some TLC? This falls into the category of a boss that flopped because it was so badly programmed that it ended up being more difficult and tedious than it had any right to be. Although, it also means that if you break their AI while they're in a corner, they're kind of easy to kill. So it's a bit of a dice roll in that sense. Floptastic, as the kids would say. Oh look, Dark Souls 2 is back again, isn't that just exciting? And oh look, Billy S is about to hit the most low-hanging fruit fight of the game. That's right, young viewer, we're dedicating a minute of your time to the Prowling Magus and Congregation fight. Because yes, we've all beaten this one to death with a pickaxe obtained by a pig digging in a specific spot at the end of the area. That's a little Brightstone Cove Seldora joke for the Dark Souls 2 fans. What is this fight? You walk into a room and you have the Prowling Magus and their congregation. You have to kill everyone in the room to deplete the health bar and make it through the church to the next bonfire. It's a simple premise. It's like one of those enemy gauntlets in Hollow Knight Silksong, where they lock you in and make you fight waves of regular enemies. And honestly, had they done the fight like that, I might have enjoyed it more. Instead, all your opponents are in one room, and the developers intend for you to slaughter your way through while avoiding the magic from the mages and taking out the head honcho as quickly as you can. It's a fight that flops for the same reason as Pinwheel, it's over in moments, and yet doesn't have the grandiose pre-fight cutscene to save it. You just walk through a fog gate and beat up the elderly. It's the most footnote of footnote fights in the series, the prototype for Deacons of the Deep from Dark Souls 3, and yet I can't help but think, this flop of a fight would be fine if they just removed the health bar entirely and made it a normal room to fight through. Make them a non-respawning mini-boss similar to certain special enemies in Dark Souls. Don't even give the pretense that they're a boss. Allow the congregation to respawn, but have the Magus be like the channeler in the Dark Souls Undead Parish, who doesn't respawn upon defeat. Boom! I just fixed the reputation of this fight. Bye, flops! One style of battle that FromSoft is addicted to including are PvP fights. The Old Monk from Demon Souls, the Summon of the Looking Glass Knight in Dark Souls 2, Half-Light in Dark Souls 3. Then Elden Ring came along and introduced the concept of PvE fights that have PvP mechanics. I'm talking mostly about Fear's champions here, though this was also the case with the Great Jar Challenge in Northern Caelid. Basically, Fear will summon 5 champions across 3 phases, 2 of which are Roger and Lionel, NPCs you can encounter in the game, but the other 3 are nameless champions. Playing offline will give you a set series of builds for these champions, which is okay, but playing online will cause these 3 champions to have randomly selected builds based on players that have embraced with Fear. In a game as vast as Elden Ring, with an insane amount of build variety and weapon selection, you could see this being a cool inclusion, until you realize that a lot of the builds will just have whatever the PvP meta is, or whatever the strongest weapons in the game are. It's not fun if you're getting waterfowl danced long before you've ever encountered a Malenia, let me tell you that. I don't have footage of this, but I remember this experience from my first playthrough in 2022, and I remember being frustrated. If you're someone who loves PvP, maybe this fight doesn't constitute being a flop, but I firmly believe that a vast majority of the player base is PvE focused for a reason, and forcing us into PvP scenarios against broken builds so we can access the Lich Dragon fight is something I will never not find grating. It's a fight that sets out to try and make PvP seem fun, but for me it just does the opposite, and for that reason, it flops its intention. Not to mention, even the PvPers don't like this fight. It's consistently ranked as one of the worst encounters in various boss rankings and community rankings, not just on my channel, but others as well. I wish there was a way to make PvP more appealing to people like me who just don't get it, but I think that ship has sailed. At this point, just stop pairing me with people who have uber powerful weapons and let me get through this mini enemy gauntlet, por favor. For the last boss on today's list, it's not a boss most will have considered to have flopped, but for me, it's a fight I feel has so much potential that just isn't realized because they didn't really know how to design it, and it's personal for me. I'm popping back into Dark Souls 2 again, this time to talk about the Old Iron King. One of the 4 great souls you need to obtain to access the Shrine of Winter and Drangleic Castle, his design is that of a demonic fiery creature similar to a Balrog from Tolkien's universe, but with a little less sauce and a little more butt crack. And this fight should have been a slam dunk for me from the design alone. The Balrog is literally my favorite fantasy monster of all time. So when he walks over and just starts slowly slamming his hands down or doing a slow circular fire breath, I realized, oh no, this fight sucks. In fact, the main difficulty of the fight is the hole in the arena, so what does that say about the boss himself? It's kind of embarrassing. This is a flawed fight that cannot be improved in its current state, because the boss is designed around its arena and the arena sucks and has like nothing to it. So in order to make this boss not flop, you would need to change up the arena to something that allows for more of a moveset. Maybe elongate the arena and have the boss at the far side, with half of the fight being you needing to reach the boss, avoiding fireballs, fire breaths, and hiding behind rubble to avoid specific attacks, with the second half of the fight being up close where you can use its current moveset, but speed up some of the attacks and add a few AoE lava puddles on some of the slams so you can't melt the boss immediately. I'm just spitballing with ideas here. I just wish the old Iron King was actually fun to fight instead of feeling like a less intimidating ceaseless discharge. At the very least, the boss should be bigger, more imposing. He doesn't really give off danger, or royalty, or anything of that matter. He flops at intimidating the player, he flops at having a good moveset, his arena is a flop, and my love of his inspiration only serves to make him even more of a flop in my eyes by comparison. Old Iron King, bestie, I just want you to be capable. Is that so much to ask? Yes, apparently it is. And those were 7 bosses who flopped on arrival. What did you think? Do you have any bosses that flopped for you when you fought them? Let me know down below. If this video reaches 600 likes, I'll consider doing a commenter version. But thank you everyone for tuning in. Be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on my future videos. I want to give a shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. And if you want to find me, I've got social medias, I've got a Discord, I've got a Twitch, and I've got a Blue Sky. So come and hang out, chill, and I'll see you next time for another video. Adios.